I came home early after successfully completing a grueling 12-hour surgery. All I wanted was sleep, but instead I walked into an absolute nightmare. My name is Lydia. I am a 36-year-old trauma surgeon, and until that afternoon I thought the worst part of my day was in the operating room. I was wrong. As I opened my front door, I heard my teenage daughter crying hysterically. I rushed down the hallway but stopped dead in my tracks. My parents were standing over her, aggressively demanding she tell them exactly where I kept the ownership documents for my home. Before I could intervene, another sound caught my attention from the master bedroom. I peered around the doorframe and saw my older sister frantically ransacking my room. She was ripping clothes out of drawers and tossing them across the floor. She was not just looking for the property documents. She was actively stuffing my expensive jewelry into her handbag. Most people would scream or call the police immediately. However, working in trauma taught me how to stay perfectly calm during a crisis. I slowly stepped backward into the shadows and locked the front door as quietly as possible. They had no idea I was home, and they had absolutely no idea they had just crossed a line I would never forgive. I was going to make sure they regretted ever setting foot in my house. If you have ever been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect you, you are in the right place. Welcome to Revenge Mode. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story about resilience and serving ultimate justice. Now let's get into exactly how I made them pay. The darkness in the hallway concealed my presence long enough to observe the full extent of their betrayal. I slowly slid my smartphone from my coat pocket and tapped the record button, capturing the horrifying reality playing out inside my own home. I focused the lens first on my older sister Shannon. She moved with frantic determination through my bedroom, sweeping my necklaces, rings, and sensitive financial documents directly into her large leather handbag. There was absolutely no hesitation in her movements, demonstrating a blatant sense of entitlement as she ruthlessly looted the life I had worked so hard to build. I shifted the camera angle toward the living room corner where the situation was becoming increasingly volatile. My brother-in-law Mitchell leaned aggressively over my teenage daughter Daisy. He slammed his open hand against the drywall, fiercely demanding she immediately provide the passcode to our family safe. Daisy pressed her back against the corner, her body trembling violently as she shook her head in sheer terror. Shannon and Mitchell had clearly orchestrated this entire home invasion to secure physical assets for his failing business, turning my personal sanctuary into a crime scene. The most disturbing element of this ordeal was the active participation of my parents. Instead of protecting their vulnerable granddaughter, they stood firmly behind Mitchell, completely manipulated by his fabricated financial crisis. They functioned as his loyal enforcers, adding severe psychological pressure to an already terrifying situation. As I zoomed in on the glass coffee table, a neatly printed stack of legal documents caught my attention. The bold heading at the top of the page was unmistakable. Their preparation was shockingly sophisticated because they already had a quitclaim deed prepared in advance. They fully intended to force my signature and legally strip my ownership of the property today. I lowered my phone, secured the recorded footage, and stepped out from the shadows into the bright overhead lighting. I walked straight past my parents without a single glance and marched directly up to my sister. I reached out and firmly snatched the stolen paperwork and her leather handbag from her grip before she could even register my arrival. "Put that down right now, Shannon," I stated with a cold and unwavering tone, abruptly halting her greedy rampage. The entire room fell completely silent for a fraction of a second. Everyone turned to face me, their expressions shifting rapidly from initial shock to defensive anger. Mitchell took a sudden step back from Daisy while Shannon stared at her confiscated bag with wide, furious eyes. My mother was the first to recover her composure, stepping directly into my personal space with absolutely zero remorse for her actions. "Sign the papers to save this family, you selfish brat," my mother yelled, pointing her index finger aggressively inches from my face. She continued to loudly berate me, insisting that sacrificing my hard-earned home was the only viable solution to rescue Mitchell from his catastrophic financial debt and preserve our family reputation. I did not raise my voice, nor did I engage in her chaotic emotional manipulation. I simply placed the confiscated items behind me and looked at each of them with absolute disgust. I clearly informed them they had exactly 60 seconds to walk out my front door before I contacted the gated estate security patrol and the local police department to report an active robbery. Mitchell attempted to argue, stepping forward to justify his criminal actions, but I immediately raised my hand to silence him. I pointed straight toward the exit, refusing to break eye contact. Realizing I was completely serious, Mitchell grabbed his coat and stormed out. Shannon quickly followed him, while my parents cast one last disappointed glare in my direction before finally vacating the premises. At 8 o'clock that evening, the front door slammed shut, leaving behind a suffocating silence that settled heavily over the house. I immediately moved through the hallway to conduct a thorough security check of every single room. I ensured all ground floor windows were securely locked and physically engaged the heavy deadbolts on both the front and back entrances. Once the perimeter was completely secure, I returned to the living room where Daisy remained huddled on the sofa. I sat down next to her and pulled her into a tight embrace, desperately trying to soothe her frantic trembling. "They told me you were going bankrupt and they needed the house." Daisy sobbed in my arms. She buried her face in my shoulder, staining my shirt with tears, and detailed the relentless psychological abuse she had just endured over the last hour. She explained how Mitchell had cornered her against the wall, relentlessly interrogating her about the safe combination while punching the drywall to emphasize his threats. Even worse was the profound cruelty of my parents. Instead of intervening, her grandparents had stood by, coldly reinforcing Mitchell's fabricated lies by insisting I had ruined the family financially. They had actively pressured an innocent teenager to betray her own mother to serve their selfish agenda. "I'm going to make sure they never hurt you again," I whispered, stroking her messy hair. I stayed with her on the couch until her breathing finally leveled out, and she fell into an exhausted sleep. I carefully covered her with a heavy blanket, ensuring she was comfortable, and walked straight into my home office. I sat down at my wooden desk, booted up my computer, and connected directly to the central security camera system. My primary focus shifted entirely to extracting the surveillance footage from the past 2 hours to secure irrefutable evidence. I systematically downloaded the video files and reviewed every single second of the recordings on my monitor. The high-definition cameras had captured everything with absolute clarity from multiple different angles across the residence. I watched the footage of Shannon aggressively tearing apart my bedroom, clearly documenting her intentional theft of my jewelry and private financial documents. I then switched over to the living room feed, where the hidden microphone had picked up the crystal-clear audio of Mitchell's aggressive intimidation tactics. The digital video displayed his towering, threatening posture over Daisy, alongside my parents nodding approval of his psychological violence. I carefully logged the exact timestamps of each specific criminal offense, organizing the downloaded digital files into a secure master folder. Knowing I needed immediate legal guidance as well as someone to trust, I picked up my cell phone and dialed my best friend and lawyer, Elliot. He answered on the second ring, instantly recognizing the unusual late-night timing of my call. I briefly explained the severe escalation of the situation, outlining the attempted robbery, the physical intimidation of my daughter, and the discovery of their premeditated real estate scheme. Elliot listened to my report without interrupting, absorbing the gravity of the ultimate betrayal by my blood relatives. He offered the necessary empathy to ground my racing thoughts, but his sharp professional instincts quickly took over the conversation. We immediately began formulating a comprehensive legal counterattack strategy right then and there, utilizing the quiet isolation of my home office to plan our next steps. "Save the camera footage on multiple drives immediately," Elliot instructed me over the phone with a deadly serious tone. I followed his explicit command without any hesitation. I copied the organized video and audio files onto 3 separate encrypted flash drives and uploaded a secondary backup directly to a secure cloud server. I locked the physical drive securely inside my bottom desk drawer, pocketed the key, and finally powered down the computer monitor to conclude the night's work. At 9 o'clock the next morning, I sat directly across the heavy oak desk in Elliot's downtown law office, fully prepared for the impending legal battle. I reached into my leather briefcase and retrieved a folded document inside a clear plastic sleeve. Early that morning, while picking up the scattered debris in my living room, I had noticed a stray piece of paper partially hidden underneath the edge of the area rug. When I unfolded it, my blood ran completely cold. It was a standardized quitclaim deed. The legal document had my full name pre-printed as the primary grantor, explicitly transferring the total ownership of my gated estate to a holding company controlled by Mitchell. The only elements missing from the page were my physical signature and a notary public stamp. I silently slid the protected document across the smooth surface of the desk. Elliot picked it up, adjusting his posture as he scanned the dense legal paragraphs. He immediately identified the predatory clauses intentionally inserted to bypass standard property transfer regulations. They had engineered the paperwork to instantly strip my equity the second my pen touched the paper. "This is textbook fraudulent deed preparation," Elliot stated, firmly tapping his index finger decisively on the desk. He explained that the presence of this physical document transformed their violent home invasion into a highly organized conspiracy to commit real estate theft. They did not just want to bully me, they wanted to legally eradicate my financial independence. "We are looking at a civil and criminal hybrid case here." He continued analyzing the situation, his eyes filled with absolute determination. He detailed how the civil component would secure my assets and impose restraining orders, while the criminal aspect would aggressively target Mitchell for attempted extortion and fraud. Suddenly, the sharp notification chime of my cell phone broke the serious silence in the room. A new email alert flashed across the screen. The sender was Mitchell. I opened the message and read the arrogant text aloud for Elliot to hear. Mitchell used an incredibly condescending tone, explicitly demanding that I stop making a dramatic scene over a minor misunderstanding. He insisted I needed to act like a loyal family member and quietly complete the property handover to save him from his aggressive business creditors. He even attached a clean digital PDF copy of the exact same quitclaim deed currently sitting on Elliot's desk. A surge of intense anger rushed through my veins, but Elliot immediately raised his hand, signaling me to maintain my composure. He instantly recognized this arrogant email as a massive tactical advantage. Mitchell had just willingly handed us time-stamped, irrefutable written proof of his ongoing extortion attempt. Elliot knew we needed to keep Mitchell talking and ultimately lure him into a controlled environment where law enforcement could intervene without any risk to my safety. "Tell him you need time to review the terms before signing," Elliot instructed me, closely guiding my legal strategy as I opened a blank reply window. I followed his professional advice perfectly. I carefully drafted a short, submissive response, swallowing my pride to project the perfect illusion of utter defeat. I typed that the entire situation was highly overwhelming, but I was ultimately willing to cooperate for the sake of preserving our family reputation. I formally requested a meeting at an official notary office of his own choosing by the end of the week to execute the final paperwork. I reviewed the deceptive text one last time, confidently pressed the send button, and locked my phone screen. The trap was officially set. 2 days before the scheduled notary meeting, I systematically arranged every detail to guarantee absolute physical and emotional safety for my household. My primary objective was securing my daughter. Early that morning, I packed a small suitcase and secretly drove Daisy out to a trusted surgical colleague's home located in the quiet northern suburbs. I explicitly instructed my colleague not to open the door for anyone matching my parents' or Shannon's descriptions. I also temporarily confiscated Daisy's cell phone to isolate her from any toxic text messages or manipulative phone calls from our blood relatives. Once she was safely locked away from their psychological harassment, I drove straight to the hospital to complete my shift, maintaining my usual professional routine. Late that afternoon, after an exhausting rotation, the crisp air bit at my face as I walked across the sprawling concrete parking lot toward my vehicle. I unlocked the doors remotely, but before I could reach the driver's side handle, a dark sedan abruptly swerved into the empty space directly in front of my car, blocking my exit. My mother quickly jumped out of the passenger seat. Her face flushed red with frantic desperation. She marched aggressively toward me. Ignoring the public setting and passing hospital staff, she launched into a furious tirade about family loyalty and impending financial ruin. She demanded I bypass the Friday appointment and sign the property transfer paperwork right there in the parking lot to appease Mitchell's creditors. I completely ignored her shouting swiftly, sidestepped her reaching hands, slipped into the driver's seat, and immediately engaged the electronic door locks. Furious at my blatant dismissal and her loss of control, she threw her weight against the front hood of my vehicle. "You have to sign it before Mitchell gets sued or you'll ruin us all," my mother yelled forcefully, slamming her open palms against my windshield. Her violent physical outburst only solidified my unyielding resolve. I pressed the ignition button, allowing the engine to roar to life. I did not yell back or match her chaotic emotional energy. Instead, I calmly lowered the driver's side window just a few inches to deliver my final warning. "He ruined himself, Mom. Stay away from me," I stated coldly, my voice cutting sharply through the chilly afternoon air. I rolled the tinted window back up, shifted the automatic transmission into reverse, and smoothly maneuvered my vehicle out of the blocked spot. I accelerated heavily toward the main exit gate, leaving her standing entirely alone in the middle of the asphalt, screaming and wildly waving her arms at my retreating taillights. I merged seamlessly onto the busy highway, focusing entirely on the traffic ahead. The tense silence inside the cabin was quickly broken by the familiar ringing of my cell phone, connecting through the Bluetooth audio system. I glanced at the dashboard display and immediately answered the incoming call from Elliot. He did not waste any time with casual greetings. He had spent his entire day compiling our accumulated evidence into a comprehensive legal package. "The Real Estate Crimes Division is reviewing our file now," Elliot reported confidently over the line, confirming our offensive strategy was successfully in motion. He detailed exactly how the local investigators were currently analyzing the forged deed preparation alongside the security camera footage I had provided. The authorities were actively building a rock-solid fraud case against Mitchell behind closed doors. With my daughter safely hidden away and the local criminal investigators officially mobilized on my behalf, all the necessary pieces were perfectly aligned. I ended the phone call with Elliot, kept my hands steady on the steering wheel, and mentally prepared myself for the final confrontation. At exactly 10 o'clock on Friday morning, I pushed open the heavy glass door of the downtown real estate brokerage firm's main conference room. The atmosphere inside was suffocatingly tense. Mitchell, Shannon, and my parents were already seated comfortably around the long mahogany table. They wore identical, triumphant expressions, fully expecting me to obediently hand over my valuable property and surrender to their extortion. My mother sat with her arms crossed, projecting self-righteous authority, while Shannon eagerly watched my every move like a hungry predator. I pulled out a leather chair and sat down directly across from my brother-in-law, keeping my posture perfectly straight. Without even waiting for me to settle in, Mitchell immediately slid the forged quitclaim deed across the polished wooden surface directly toward my chair. He unceremoniously tossed a heavy silver pen right on top of the legal document. He drummed his fingers aggressively on the edge of the table, continuously urging me to sign the paperwork quickly so he could instantly resolve the massive financial mess he had recklessly created. He spoke rapidly, dictating the terms and attempting to rush the procedure to prevent me from actually reading the predatory clauses hidden within the dense text. However, I was strictly following the explicit trap awareness instructions provided by Elliot earlier that week. Before reviewing the papers, I carefully placed my handbag on the center of the table, with a high-definition digital voice recorder actively running inside the unzipped pocket. Instead of reaching for the pen, I picked up the document and pretended to scrutinize the complex paragraphs. I began asking a series of pointed, sarcastic questions regarding the specific intent behind the sudden transfer of my property. I questioned the exact monetary amount of his hidden debt and demanded to know why the receiving entity was a newly established shell company. "Just sign the damn paper so we can clear this debt," Mitchell growled, losing all his patience as he watched me delay the process. His overwhelming arrogance completely blinded his judgment. Assuming I was entirely defeated and legally ignorant, he foolishly dropped his guard. Mitchell began speaking openly about his illicit business practices in front of everyone. He loudly complained about his aggressive commercial creditors and brazenly explained how transferring my house into his corporate entity would successfully hide his personal assets from impending bankruptcy proceedings. He detailed his criminal scheme perfectly, providing the exact verbal confession the local fraud investigators needed. "So, you admit this deed is just to cover your fraud?" I smirked, carefully baiting the trap to ensure the hidden recorder captured his entire statement clearly. Mitchell scoffed confidently, confirming his illegal intentions out loud without a single shred of remorse. My parents nodded along in agreement, continuously urging me to stop asking useless questions and just complete the transaction. Having secured the necessary audio evidence, I decisively dropped the fraudulent document back onto the table. I placed the silver pen down beside it, crossed my arms tightly, and flatly refused to sign anything. The triumphant atmosphere in the room shattered instantly. Mitchell exploded in a sudden fit of violent rage. He violently slammed both of his fists onto the table, sending the pen clattering across the floor. He leaned aggressively over the table, his face twisted in absolute fury, attempting to physically intimidate me into submission. "I will ruin your career if you walk out that door." He pointed his finger directly in my face, shouting his aggressive threat. He frantically vowed to spread malicious rumors to the state medical board and completely destroy my professional reputation as a surgeon. I simply maintained my cold composure, staring directly into his angry eyes without flinching or backing down, knowing his desperate threats were merely the dying gasps of a cornered criminal. At exactly 15 minutes past 10 in the morning, the heavy glass door of the conference room swung open violently, abruptly cutting off Mitchell's unhinged and aggressive threats. Elliot strode confidently into the room, exuding absolute professional authority. Right behind him walked a stern-looking man dressed in a plain business suit, operating as an official investigator from the local fraud unit. Their sudden and unannounced intrusion instantly paralyzed everyone sitting at the table. Mitchell stopped shouting mid-sentence, his raised hand dropping awkwardly to his side as he stared blankly at the two new arrivals. I remained perfectly calm amidst the sudden shift in power. I reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out a thick bound stack of high-definition photographs printed directly from my home security system. I tossed the heavy stack forcefully onto the center of the mahogany table. The glossy images scattered widely across the polished wood, clearly displaying Shannon stealing my valuable jewelry and Mitchell violently intimidating my teenage daughter. Without saying a single word, I reached into my handbag, retrieved the active digital voice recorder, and pressed the playback button. Mitchell's arrogant, detailed confession regarding his illegal shell company from just moments ago echoed loudly throughout the dead silent room. Their previous atmosphere of absolute arrogance was completely and utterly shattered in an instant. "Mitchell, you are under investigation for civil fraud," the investigator stated loudly, holding his official badge right in front of Mitchell's rapidly paling face. The investigator did not stop there. He formally instructed Mitchell to step away from the forged quitclaim deed immediately. He firmly warned him that any attempt to conceal assets, destroy financial records, alter existing legal documents, or intimidate potential witnesses would result in immediate criminal arrest. Mitchell physically collapsed back into his leather chair, his jaw hanging open as the color completely drained from his cheeks. He realized the inescapable severity of his legal predicament. He was entirely trapped by his own documented words and reckless actions. The harsh reality of the situation suddenly crashed down on Shannon. Her eyes darted frantically between the incriminating photographs of her theft and the investigator's intimidating badge. Realizing she was caught dead to rights on camera stealing and was now directly implicated as an active accomplice in a major extortion scheme, she descended into absolute panic. She jumped out of her chair, tears streaming heavily down her face, and desperately lunged across the table toward my position. "Please, Lydia, don't do this to your own sister." Shannon sobbed uncontrollably, aggressively trying to grab my arm to force my sympathy and stop the impending legal disaster. "Do not contact my client again." Elliot firmly intercepted her sudden movement, forcefully brushing Shannon's hand away and stepping forward to establish a safe physical barrier between us. He sternly warned her that any further physical contact or harassment would immediately result in additional assault charges. My parents, who had been so vocal, demanding, and self-righteous just minutes earlier, were now completely paralyzed. They sat frozen in their chairs, trembling uncontrollably as they stared blankly at the undeniable evidence of their complicity spread across the table. They remained absolutely silent. The horrific realization finally dawned on them that the daughter they had consistently despised and tried to ruthlessly manipulate had just single-handedly dismantled their entire future. I had systematically and legally cut off every single financial escape route they thought they possessed. Having successfully executed my plan, I stood up from my chair, adjusted my coat, and confidently walked out of the conference room alongside Elliot, leaving my treacherous relatives entirely at the mercy of the law. Exactly 1 month after that chaotic and highly stressful Friday morning at the notary office, genuine order was finally restored in the daily lives of my teenage daughter and me. The devastating legal consequences of their calculated extortion attempt had been swiftly and ruthlessly executed by the local authorities. Mitchell was formally indicted and currently faces severe charges of civil fraud, alongside attempted extortion. Because he was considered a significant flight risk with a heavily documented history of complex financial deceit, he was facing the very real possibility of sitting in a county jail cell while awaiting his official criminal trial. His fraudulent shell company was entirely dismantled by the state, leaving his professional reputation in absolute ruins. My older sister Shannon did not escape the harsh reality of justice either. To carefully avoid serving direct prison time for her undeniable involvement in the physical theft and overall conspiracy, she was legally forced to accept a humiliating settlement agreement. She was officially placed on strict criminal probation for actively assisting in the illegal concealment and attempted liquidation of my private assets. Her permanent criminal record would now constantly reflect her profound, unforgivable greed. My parents successfully avoided serving any actual prison time, but they still suffered catastrophic, life-altering consequences. Their ultimate punishment came in the form of massive financial devastation. During the intensive fraud investigation, it was officially revealed that they had secretly co-signed and financially guaranteed several of Mitchell's failing commercial business loans. When his corporate entities inevitably collapsed under legal scrutiny, the aggressive creditors immediately targeted my parents' bank accounts, completely wiping out their entire life savings. As for my own mental peace and stability, Elliot successfully helped me secure a permanent, comprehensive restraining order against all 4 of them. They are now legally forbidden from contacting me or approaching Daisy under the strict threat of immediate arrest. Our home has finally returned to being a beautifully safe and quiet sanctuary. On behalf of the Revenge Mode channel, we proudly present this story for educational purposes. It powerfully conveys the critical importance of establishing strict personal boundaries and demonstrates how to effectively handle severe family crises using rational thinking and the legal system. Lydia demonstrated extraordinary emotional control by prioritizing concrete evidence over immediate chaotic confrontation. By decisively severing all ties with her profoundly toxic blood relatives, she successfully protected her daughter and her hard-earned assets. Conversely, the antagonists ultimately suffered catastrophic legal and financial ruin, facing the inevitable consequences of their own malicious decisions. This challenging life experience provides several incredibly valuable lessons regarding personal boundaries and self-respect. Bloodline does not guarantee loyalty. Sharing DNA is never a free pass to commit crimes. Toxic family members can be dangerous threats to your stability. You owe them absolutely nothing if they intentionally choose to exploit your hard work. Blind forgiveness enables destruction. Tolerating abusive behavior from relatives only provides them with endless opportunities to ruin your future. Establishing ironclad boundaries is a fundamental necessity, not a selfish act. Protect your achievements fiercely. The assets you build are meant to secure the people who genuinely respect you. You must never sacrifice your own stability to rescue greedy individuals from their own reckless mistakes. Cutting off toxic ties, no matter how painful, is the ultimate path to genuine peace. Thank you so much for patiently listening to the very end of this incredible journey on Revenge Mode. We truly appreciate your support. What are your thoughts on Lydia's absolute decision to permanently cut off her family and use the law to protect her child? Please leave a comment sharing your perspective, and do not forget to subscribe to catch our next story.